Seeing a quorum of voting members, I call the September 18th Student Achievement and District Instructional Performance Committee of the whole meeting to order. Treasurer Wagner, would you please call the attendance roll?
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Thank you, Treasurer Wagner. Interim
Happy to do so. Today, we'll hear from Interim Assistant Superintendent John Chambers around monitoring Guardrail 5, chronic absenteeism, and Guardrail 6, community partnerships.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board President Bolton,
Good afternoon.
Vice President Weinberg, and members of the board. I will be talking tonight about Guardrail 5, which states the superintendent will not ignore district-wide chronic absenteeism at school sites, paying special attention to family involvement. And just a reminder that chronic absenteeism is when a student misses 10% or more of the school days of the year. And this school year, we have 171 days in the school year, which means a student who meets that 17.1% or 17.1 days will meet that threshold to be considered chronically absent. Guardrail 5A, the percent of K-12 students with chronic absenteeism will decrease from 45.9% in May of '23 to 36% by May of '25. And looking at the the graph here, we see in '22-23 we were at 45.9% of students that were chronically absent to 42% in '23-24, which was slightly below our target, but according to our metric to go to May 2025, we are on target. Guardrail 5B, the percent of K-12 Black students with chronic absenteeism will decrease from 53.2% in May of '23 to 39.2% by May of 2025. If you look at a graph, we had in '22-23, we had 53.2 of our Black students that were considered chronically absent, and that reduced to 50.7 in '23-24. It was slightly below our target of 46.2, but according to our metrics, we are on track to meet the target of 39.2 by May of 2025. In Guardrail C, the percentage of K-12 Hispanic students with chronic absenteeism will decrease from 44.3 in May of '23 to 32.3% by May of 2025. In 2022-23, we had 44.3% of our Hispanic students that were chronically absent. In '23-24, that number reduced to 37.2. That met that '23-24 target of 38.3, and we are on track to meet the '24-25 target of 32.3. So some key takeaways. All student groups saw improvement year over year, just missing the '23-24 target, but we are on track for our ultimate goal in May of '25. Hispanic students improved in both quarter 3 and quarter 4, and year over year, surpassing the '23-24 target. And there was a deep focus on chronic absenteeism with social workers and attendance social workers. We can see that that's actually paying off. So our next steps. Meetings with principals and assistant principals monthly to support leadership understanding of SEL, PBIS, and chronic absenteeism. More embedded PD and resources are provided to schools with an assigned district point person to support each school with tiered systems of support with positive school culture. And there are weekly huddles with all social workers and attendance social workers to identify strategies that have an impact and identify barriers to quickly address and respond to the needs of the students and the learning communities. And then we have increased professional development opportunities that support mental health, SEL, and PBIS. For improved education for families on the importance of attending partial days, starting with a strong attendance in September. We've launched an attendance awareness month for the entire district to promote attendance and healthy attendance habits. And we have a partnership with Parent Champion to increase awareness of resources and supports to increase attendance with parents and in our communities. And finally, we have launched the Stay in the Game partnership with FC Cincinnati to further focus on reducing chronic absenteeism. For the 2024-25 school year, we have launched the Stay in the Game in conjunction with the Department of Education Workforce, the Cleveland Browns, the Columbus Crew, and FC Cincinnati. And this initiative is focused on helping schools, families, and students and their communities work together to increase regular attendance and decrease absenteeism. STIG will play a key role in connecting the districts and educational leaders to the resources and tools that can meaningfully improve attendance.
Thank you. Do board members have any questions or comments? Mr. Craig.
Just a brief two comments, really. So the first one is, again, I think it's always important when we talk about part of the difficulty with chronic absenteeism is that not everybody understands what all goes into chronic absenteeism. And so when things happen in our schools, when things happen where a student may be out for a day or two for different reasons, it's so quick to become, you're so quick to become chronically absent with just a few days of missing each quarter.
Right.
So I think that's a really important thing to make sure we just keep reiterating and keep stressing because it's hours too, right? So
Yes.
student misses a couple hours to go to a doctor, go to an appointment or whatever, that has a big effect. I wanted to just also reiterate, while we did see, we're seeing the trends go down, I think also it may be helpful for us to understand kind of, are there any patterns that might happen at certain times of the year where we might see those numbers suddenly increase? And I would imagine that there may be some periods of time, especially at the end of the year, that might generate more absenteeism than, for instance, in the middle, like your second quarter may not have the same level of absenteeism as your third and fourth or your first and fourth. And so that just might be helpful for us in thinking about it in the future, because I think that might be also part of the messaging is targeted around when they might be absent more often than. And then one third one actually also is just the difference between our age groups, because we know that K through 6 and K through 8 aren't absent because the kids decided to leave the school that day, right? Or did decide not to walk into the school building when they got off the bus. But we do know that that can be potentially something different at the high school. So even the outreach to parents through the K-8 might be more directed at getting their kid to school each day. The message for 9 through 12 might be a little bit different. So I think that's a great part of partnering up with the parents.
Correct.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers, for this presentation. So I am curious, so I've had an opportunity to look through the state report card, and I know we'll have more discussion around that coming up soon, correct? But I noticed as it pertains to chronic absenteeism, there's a difference in what's reflected here in comparison to the state. So I'm noticing that it says 42% is what we've gone down to in terms of addressing chronic absenteeism. But the state is reporting that it's a 43.5%. Is there any information or feedback that you could share as to why it's reflecting the different?
I'm not sure what the state uses as their, for their calculation, but I will look into it and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. And if Interim Superintendent Murphy, if you can maybe share if you have any information as to why it's reflecting something different?
I don't at this moment, but we'll dig into it.
Okay. And then my other question is around, So I know that we've launched things with FC Cincinnati as well as Stay in the Game. And so I think that's a great initiative, but I am curious to know how are we making this very real and actualized for our students to connect with as well as our families. So I know that we're talking about making sure that there's resources and providing information, but what are those tangible things that we are anticipating doing or actually doing to make sure that our students are able to connect with these platforms?
If I may, can I call up Ms. House? Is she here? She can speak more on the details of that program.
Good afternoon. To be able to answer your first question was about why is there a difference between the report card and then what was presented, the data that we've been collaborating with Children's Hospital. The simple answer is it's regarding the Where Kids Count. So on the report card, it's about those students that have been here with us for a full academic year, and the data that was presented with Children's were all the students that were there at that moment in time during that quarter or through the year. So we might be counting in students that, according to the state, don't count for us or against us because they haven't been with us a full year. So that's why there's a difference in the percentage. The trajectory was still the same, but we were able to note, and we did talk about that difference as we were analyzing the data ourselves with the report card.
But to that point, but we are meeting that indicator. I think it was something reflecting that if we're, I guess, maybe above a certain percentage, we get that 1.1% increase to work towards the gap closing indicator. Okay.
So, and we're continuing to work towards that because that's nowhere near where we want to be. That's why the partnership, this new partnership with Stay in the Game is so critical. It provides us an opportunity not only to yield resources, which they will be sending us very soon, memorabilia, things that we can give to students and staff to help continue to promote attendance. And so FC will be our biggest partner, so we might see a lot of FC Cincinnati things throughout our schools. And so that's a part of it, but then they also support us with data analysis because they receive their data straight through the state. And so because of that, we're able to not only work with them, but also to be able to work with other large urban districts that are like us to see what trends they see, what strategies that we're employing to learn from one another and to kind of learn quickly. So there are several calls. There's a conference that's coming up, I believe, next month that I'll be attending, and we'll be able to yield greater insights just to see what's working around the state. But as far as applicable to the schools, the strategies that we learned, we'll definitely deploy with our teams. We'll work directly through our social workers as kind of continuing to be our champions, but then we'll also see kind of the paraphernalia down to the student level to celebrate them coming to school or reducing the absenteeism.
Okay, perfect. And so I know that there's this collaborative effort with social and emotional mental health support. How are our school counselors involved in that work as well?
Social emotional learning is very important. Starting in October, all of our social emotional learning groups will be started with our social workers. So depending on the size of their school, they are required to do a certain amount of social emotional learning groups. They do that in conjunction with connecting with their school teams on how to promote. We do have at the elementary level the PATHS curriculum, and at the high school level, we'll be piloting a few other curriculums for social emotional learning to really help support the students and their needs. With that, there's the House Bill 123 that we're still working on through with suicide prevention and with awareness about that. So I had a conversation with my own son. He's like, hey, Mom, I watched this video talk about say hello. I said, oh, was it on social isolation? And he was like, yeah. So I was like, yes, we're getting it out there because that all plays a part. It all plays a part in your role with social emotional wellness. So with restorative practice, we'll start having coaching of targeted schools so that it's not just the professional development that we provide within 2 days, but it's also ongoing coaching throughout the year so that they can meet with their leadership teams, which should include teachers, social workers, paraprofessionals, security that's on their team, but also work with them in their systems to make sure that our systems allow us to have a restorative environment. So those are the things, it's kind of not one strategy, but a multitude of strategies that are going to help us to support our culture of learning. One thing that we have going on that we had last year and will continue this year, we've already started this year, which I'm excited about, are instructional walkthroughs. But those are very comprehensive. It's not only academic, but we also have our PBIS team that comes along so that we can look holistically at the glows and grows of each school, but then we can also talk about what are next steps and what are the supports that that school needs. So that's really exciting. I know that schools are like, when are you coming out? And it's hard hitting all of these schools, but it's very well worth it. And that's when we kind of see our work in action. We see what's working, what's not working, because what we put on paper here can look completely different than what's in the schoolhouse. So it gives us an opportunity to reevaluate and really send out the appropriate supports.
Yeah, so embedded in that work, we're talking and we're addressing across the spectrum, you know, the importance of being present at school and digging deep to find out what those barriers are for us.
And working down to the classroom level. Students spend the majority of their time in the classroom. How do we make the classroom a safe learning environment so that students feel comfortable, they want to continue to come, and they don't run the other way?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other members have questions? Dr. Moffett?
So forgive me, but stay there, future Dr. House, because I have a question and I had to get up because I'm having some technical difficulties, so I missed a couple of slides. But what are we doing to engage our parents and the community around absenteeism and what that means? In part, to Board Member Craig's point, I think that there needs to be broader education around what that definition means. Some parents are just like, well, hey, you missed today, but that they don't realize how it's calculated and how that impact of just that one day could really potentially be damaging if it were to add up, even for small things like doctor visits. So are we doing anything around addressing absenteeism and engagement on the parental level or in the community? I think, you know, 4th and 5th graders, they may or may not get themselves there. So I think we're taking, I guess to my point is we tend to take things out of the purview of the parents, and really we need to bring them into, it's great to put all this responsibility on kids that they know this data, but the reality is that we have 3 in that partnership. So what are we doing there?
I think it's really, as you said, continuing to educate the community. I know that we wanted to start off with September with Attendance Awareness Month, and I know October is Bully Prevention Month. But I think continuously having these conversations that it's on the forefront when principals are talking, to be able to send out little reminders. I don't think I even realized that missing 2 days each month will qualify you to be chronically absent. That's all it takes is 2 days. That could be a doctor appointment, and I think my stomach hurts. And that's it. Especially if they're out those 2 days. And so there are several things that we're working with the social workers to be able to, once we start seeing trends, or we see that families need resources that are going to keep them out, especially if students are sick or ill, because it's for whatever reason, excused or unexcused, they're chronically absent. Just because you have a doctor's note does not absolve you from that. So we need to, because our goal is to keep the kids in school, but we try to build in the resources. That's why it's so important when we talk with MindPeace. Each month, we really look at what's the level of care that students have access to and how do we increase that. The likelihood, if they're taking school-based health treatment, they're not going to miss as much school as if their parents have to take them elsewhere to another campus or facility. So to what you are suggesting, yes, we will continue to have awareness about chronic absenteeism. And I think as we continue to have the community conversations, to continue to mention that. I know a couple of weeks ago, I was able to represent the district on NPR to talk about chronic absenteeism, just to get the community to continue to spread the word about what that is, and that we are a big district, a great district, and we have a lot of resources that I don't think that parents know. So that's something that we're putting together is like a pamphlet and a flyer that can go out in the community to talk about the social emotional learning, the mental health, and just kind of the attendance resources that we can give to families.
And just as another, thank you, because that parallels with what I'm hearing from people across the state and across the nation. This is not just a singular Cincinnati issue.
Yeah.
This is definitely a big issue. Are we pretty much aligned with the other large urban districts around our numbers regarding chronic absenteeism?
So I can give you the comparison that we have, because we just recently pulled that. I don't have that off the top of my head, but yes, the numbers are large. I think it is a problem that we see full scale. That's why the organization Stay in the Game expanded, because before it was just like, hey, let's work in our own little area, and then we say, oh, no, it's really across the state. So yes, we do see those numbers, but we can give you the specific numbers so that you can see where we compare with other areas and districts.
Member Mapp, follow up?
Yes. So I do have a question about how do we support parents when maybe their child or their children, for whatever reason, are not in the home? You know, it's mostly for our adolescent high school students, and maybe they are staying at a friend's house, parent is trying to get them to come home. You know, we kind of know those, circumstances. How do we actively support our parents to make sure that they know what steps to take to ensure that they're doing what they can? Because a lot of times, yes, we do have to engage the parents, but we also know that parents are also trying to do what they can, but maybe the child is making the decision to not be present at school. How do we help them, in a manner of advocating for their children to be back at school, but also follow necessary steps legally, right, to help their child get back to school
I think
and
there's
home?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that they can do and that we can work collectively. I think we have Focus that can be a powerful tool once we learn how to utilize it and figure out all the wonderful things that it can do. But if a parent has an account on Focus, they can always see what their child's attendance is from bell to bell, especially when they're in high school. So they can go, I see that you're going to school, but you're always missing bell number 1. So talk to me about what's first bell? Oh, it's gym. Okay, well, you have to take that. Let's, figure this out. But I think staying connected with Focus, especially if they can always update us when they have changed their contact information. If they do that, they will automatically receive a call when their child has missed a bell. It will notify them, it will give them a message. And so if we can get the most current, I don't care how often their number changes, we will change it in the system, we will get it right. Even if they're not sure if we have the right number, I always say, put in more numbers because it never hurts. And to think of this as not only them, but their community. It might be an aunt or an uncle or a grandmother who's always at home that's had the same landline that might receive the phone call. How do we work together as a community so that way we're involved and we can ask those questions? That's one. I think schools, as we get started in this school year, if schools can continue to engage students in extracurricular activities, that makes a connection for the student and it keeps them involved. Some students might only come to school for basketball, or they might only come to school for acting club. Whatever that connection is, that gets them connected with other students, it gets them connected with other teachers. So everything doesn't have to be punitive. We can do a better job of saying what other opportunities at school do we have that'll keep you interested. I think that those are just a few strategies that we can do as a community, and I think they're quick wins.
Do other board members have questions or comments to add? I do really appreciate what Member Craig mentioned in terms of getting a little bit more precise about what this is. And I think we've talked about that before. Just any absence counts against our young people, when indeed we could have young people fighting cancer, and they're counting toward our chronic absenteeism. I also feel really strongly that there's a cohort of young people, be they little people or be they our teenagers, that are the ones that are chronically absent. But what's getting communicated to the community, in part through the report card and all this other stuff, is that somehow our children are not attending school. And when you actually look at our attendance, the ones that are registered and enrolled with us, all things considered, there's a significant number of young people that are coming to school on a daily basis. But that's not what the PR sounds like, because of the way that it's reported or communicated. And I think there's a reason to have an alternative message about our young people, because if people think that our children don't come to school, they're also going to think they're not going to go to their jobs when it's time to hire them. And it's a personality profile that is unfortunate, and it puts our kids at a negative disadvantage. So if there's a way to, and I'm really into alternative ways to present who we are, rather than the way Columbus always wants us to. But in this area particularly, it seems like we could be doing that. And I think it's also important, and I know this is risky, but it's important to know it by school. It's not that it has to be presented to us, but I think the board might be interested, as I'm sure you all know that information. And is there an issue? Is it transportation? Is it the socioeconomic? Is there a social emotional reason at a particular school community where maybe attendance is down or what have you? So the more we know about this, the next time this is presented, I think would be beneficial for us to better understand it, because in the aggregate, it just shows badly for all of our children and our teenagers. God knows there's enough of that going out there, but I don't know that we can address it unless the way you guys are going to be doing it, which is disaggregating it, would be helpful. But any other comments, questions? Mr. Lindy.
Thanks, Ms. Bolden. I think the comment from Dr. Moffett was right on point earlier, and I just wanted to share my joint interest in seeing how we're doing relative to other districts.
Good point.
I think I'm delighted that chronic absenteeism is getting better. I think the fact that it's getting better is a testament to the hard work of all of the teachers, all of the administrators, leadership, students over the past several years. And I think it's still too high, but it's so helpful to know, are we getting better faster than some of our peers? Are we getting better more slowly than some of our peers? And so, not today, obviously, but in the future, I think trying to see how should we feel about the rate of improvement is a great thing for us to talk about. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Great,
One of the reports that I asked from Children's was if they could give me a heat map of the city so that I could see, it was important for me to see it by school, but then also by community, because we could have communities that need additional resources that may service a multitude of schools. And so I can definitely share that information with you as well.
I think that would be great. And as interim superintendent, as we look at the next time we report on this, those additional kind of areas of specificity, but appreciate the report today. Moving on then, we'll go to our next presentation. Interim superintendent.
It's a continuation of interim assistant sup John Chambers with guardrail 6.
Thank you.
All right, guardrail 6 states, in the pursuit of equity, the superintendent will not ignore the value and number of community partnerships, community access to facilities, and decision-making at school sites. And guardrail A states the percentage of schools with an active LSDMC will increase from 90% in May of '23 to 100% in May of '25. And if you look at the graphic, we had a 92.3% in quarter one of '23-24, and that has increased to a 95% in '23-24. So our target is, oh, no, I'm sorry, we have not completed the data for fall of '23-24. Am I sounding right? No, 24-25. I'm sorry.
This data was
so-
from the spring
Yeah, this was the
23, it was from the
correct.
spring 23-24. It was from the spring 23-24, the 92.3%.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I missed that too, sorry.
So our target, of course, is to have 100% by May of '25. And based on, our looking at the data, our trend is headed to making that target. So we're on track with that, for that target. Guardrail B, the percentage of partners and other stakeholders who have a favorable response to their partnership with the district on the district survey will increase to at least 80% by May of '25. In the spring of '23-24, we had a 56.7% favorable response. And to the question, I am satisfied with our partnership with Cincinnati Public Schools that was asked this fall, we have a 57% favorability. And that is, that puts us on track to meet our target of 80% by the end of '24-25 school year. Some key takeaways. The LSDMCs are now operating at almost every school in the district. And we found that there's a need to improve the number of partners that respond in the partnership survey. And the partnership baseline provides room for growth and improvement with the community. So some of our next steps is to continue to expand and improve supports for LSDMCs and support principals to keep LSDMCs active. And one of the things that we're doing there is making sure that the school communities know what the importance of the LSDMCs are, what the LSDMCs' roles, and how the LSDMCs, their decision-making abilities can shape or reshape the school. So that is really important, and I, of course, got ahead of my PowerPoint, but I just wanted to point that out, that that is one of the big initiatives, is to make sure that not only the handful of people that we recruit to be on LSDMCs, is to make the greater community understand the impact of the LSDMCs and what the roles of the LSDMCs are. So some of the strategies for improvement is to enhance communication, to use various channels such as emails and school messenger to clearly communicate the importance and the benefits of involvement in the LSDMC to all stakeholders. And to provide training and support, we have our district-wide LSDMC meeting tonight. So that will be an important jumping off point for our LSDMCs. So that is one of the processes that we have to make sure that the LSDMCs are aware of their role in the building and the importance of that role in the building. So it's to encourage participation and to actively seek out individuals who are not currently involved and highlight their unique skills and perspectives that can benefit the committee, and to showcase some of our success stories. It's really important that we share examples of successful LSDMCs and the work that they do. And also to offer flexibility. It's really important that we offer our parents who would volunteer for LSDMCs an option to have a virtual option. So if they have transportation issues or they have conflicts where they can't get to the school, that there is a virtual option at every school's LSDMC. And we want to make sure that we seek feedback. And instead of having an end of the year survey about the effectiveness of the LSDMCs, is to have ongoing surveys to identify if there are issues with particular LSDMCs that we can provide resources for to make that LSDMC more effective. And then we look to leverage community partners, to collaborate with local organizations and community leaders to promote the benefits of the LSDMCs. And like I said, to consistently monitor and evaluate and track the progress of the effectiveness of the LSDMCs. Any questions?
Well, not surprisingly, Dr. Moffitt?
This is my favorite area, so I'm gonna give you some loving pushback. So what schools don't have an LSDMC? And I think I'm asking that question because I don't understand why they don't. I've said this for a couple of years. LSDMCs are supposed to be comprised of not only parents, but the community partner, the teachers, the staff. So I'm confused, I'm a little taken aback as to how we're not at 100%. What school or schools are having difficulty forming and or keeping their LSDMC? And what's the
Dr.
hesitancy
Moffitt,
there?
they all have LSDMCs. The concern or the area where there's opportunity is in maintaining the personnel of the LSDMCs across the board. So sometimes, for some schools, it can be difficult to have particular groups maintain that level of at least 3 consistent people. And so we're working with groups to get to that level. I would join you in saying they all have them.
Yes.
But we want,
Okay.
there's some strengthening work that needs to happen for some.
Okay, so because I asked that question in part because technically LSDMCs should be looking at so many things for the running of that school, i.e. the budget. So if that does not happen, then technically we're out of compliance with regard to our policies. So I'm asking that because what do we need to do to provide support for that consistency to happen? Is it an educational piece to let them know what the role is? I guess I'm just wondering, what can we do? That role is so huge.
I don't know if in the past few years, only my opinion, working with LSDMCs for the past 25-plus years, I don't know that they have been consistently emphasized as being important across the board. That is, the message this year is that they are critically important, and there is a different, I think, expectation
Okay,
at this point.
thank you for that, because I hope that we can maintain the 100%, because that's pretty important. And also, the survey at 50-some-odd%, I asked this question last year and the year before, I'm going to continue to ask it again. Can we see the survey?
Yes.
Because I would be very interested to understand why are we only getting 50% completion, or is it 50% satisfaction of what we're giving them? What are they being asked?
Yeah, we will share the entire survey because this is one question
Okay.
in the survey, and so you should see it. Also, the board should be reminded that after each quarterly LSDMC meeting, we have a survey based on that particular session.
Yeah.
We can share those as well moving forward, so you have a benchmark along the way as opposed to waiting for one particular question.
Well, I attend, usually Board Member Bolton and I attend those meetings. I'll be attending tonight. And the data from those meetings where I've seen 200 people in attendance is always significantly different than this data. So that's why I'm asking the question.
agree.
What is the questions that they're being asked, and are they being asked their satisfaction with their partnership, or are they being asked to complete the survey? And that's the number that we're saying 50% completed it. So I'm super interested in that. Thank you so much.
Vice President.
Yes, so thank you, Dr. Moffitt. I actually was going to ask that same question. I was going to ask what schools don't have an LSDMC. But as you were sharing the strategies for improvement, I appreciate that you shared those. My concern would be the recruitment process. So if each of the schools are supposed to have an LSDMC, and you know that someone's getting off after the 2 years, what is the process before that second year? Are they saying, okay, we need 2 parents, we need 2 students, we need 2 staff? So what is the process at each of the schools in terms of knowing when someone is going to be falling off of their LSDMC to be prepared for the next? And then are they sharing out to the families at their schools, whether it's at the opening day, welcoming day, excuse me, not opening day, that's for the Reds. But, when they have welcome parents to the first day of school or whatsoever, do they have a table set out where they're saying, let's recruit, this is what we have here at our school, we'd love to have you involved?
Go ahead, because this is John's presentation. This is also a passion area of mine, so I'll be quiet. Go ahead.
Most of our schools, we encourage the schools to have a staggered, process with the different groups. So you don't have too many of one group going off at the same time. And as the person that is falling off that year of, we encourage the recruitment of a parent, if that's the role, that is going to need to be filled. So, with having that staggered, enrollment on the LSDMCs, it helps to keep some stability where, instead of, like I said, having the, a large group just pop off all at the same time. And, it's always, wise for us to coach our principals to always have, backups in the wings because people, life happens. And we want to make sure that we can have those positions filled without any, type of delay in having a full up and going LSDMC.
Thank you.
Do other board members have any questions or comments? Mr. Lindy?
Thanks, Ms. Bolton. Could we go back to the slide with the numbers on it? The one back? Yes. I think actually one more forward, 6B maybe? Yes. Got it. People who have heard me talk about these slides in past meetings know that I sometimes have trouble interpreting them correctly. And so I was just trying to understand, is this saying that we improved 0.3 percentage points from the spring to the fall?
On that particular question, yes.
Great. And then that we have another, 23 percentage points to improve between this fall and the end of the school year?
Correct.
Okay, great. That's helpful. I think my question then is, if our current rate of improvement is like 0.3%, it seems optimistic to feel like we could close a 23% gap over the course of the school year. And I'm trying to understand, am I missing something, or is that right, or why we have the reason for optimism?
I think there's a reason for optimism because of the renewed emphasis on, reaching out to the partners and to, engaging them and making sure that we are, keeping an ongoing record of their experience with Cincinnati Public, versus, making them feel like they're, a burden or however they felt. Because looking at the numbers is obviously that, it's obvious that they weren't, necessarily, satisfied with the partnership. So I think with the renewed emphasis on expressing the importance of their role within the success of Cincinnati Public Schools, I think that goal can be reached.
I also, I'm sorry, Mr. Lindy.
I was just saying thank you. That's all. Yeah, please. No, I'm delighted. I was just saying.
No, I also want to say that I think the lateness that this was done in the spring, people are maybe waiting to see what improvements will be put in place, what will stick, what is important to us as it relates to how it impacts them. So we may be a tad early on asking them before they get to a certain comfort level in what the relationship really is about.
That makes sense. I think it sounds accurate to me. Do we have a middle category?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
I'm just like, I know we have on track and off track. Do we have a middle category?
I don't think so. No, it's just either on track or off, according to.
Okay. I was just thinking out loud. That's great. Thank you.
To Mr. Lindy's point, I think a middle thing is not a bad idea. Either or all the way or not at all. There's an incremental piece to this that needs to kind of be washed out if you can. So maybe if the board is interested in seeing that, if the administration can kind of toy with that, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Yes, sir, Mr. Craig.
Just really in 2 quick points, because I don't want to hold us off from getting to some other topics. But one is, I think it would be helpful at some point for us to really define what a partner of CPS means, or partnership with CPS means. And the reason I say that is because we did have, the number of results that are on the one slide, that there's a very small number of folks who answered that particular question. And I think part of that also may go into how do folks view themselves in connection to the district. And while I think a lot of folks think of themselves as having some form of partnership or some sort of relationship with the district, that may not have been they may not have been the target for that particular survey conversation. The other thing I wanted to just make sure that we're doing with regard to LSDMCs is, as we're also thinking about their role and how we keep them active, engaged, I want to make sure that we're also having the conversations with them as we're talking about things that would affect their buildings themselves. Because we do know that there are a number of LSDMCs who are actively engaged, who are actively asking questions about what's happening as we're looking at the changes that are coming up. And I want to make sure that we're not making a change that folks within those programs don't have an opportunity to have their voice heard in. Because one of the things I think we're going to have to do in our last point of conversation today with regard to the budget is think about also future. That we're gonna have to make really tough decisions that we will need the LSDMCs as champions on how do we do it right within that particular school. And if they are not a part of that conversation, I worry that that means stuff's changing that they didn't have a voice in, and that they won't be the champions that we are trying to have them do, and that may also be a deterrent for their continued participation in future LSDMCs.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Any other comments for this particular presentation? Let's go to our third presentation.
All right, at this time, we'll have Dr. Adam Cooper come and share the third presentation about our multilingual language learners.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to describe the work that we've been doing and our vision for the future and the steps we've taken to reach that vision. I'd like to just start out with just a quick review of the trends in our enrollment of MLL families and English learners. So you can see from the tall bars on the graph, that is the total enrollment in the district, which in the past 3 years has remained stagnant with a slight decrease in enrollment. The point there being that there is something of an opposite effect when we look at the enrollment of our MLL families that continues to rise. So in turn, those numbers or those families make up a larger percentage of our total students enrolled in the district and the total families that we serve. This will, I think, help us understand a little bit about the difference between multilingual learners and English learners. So you can see a little bit of the difference in that third column there. Our English learners, the number looks like it's a smaller number than multilingual learners. So, which that number grows consistently, and by some measures, if we look at longer trends, even exponentially. But our multilingual learners are any students who speak more than one language, but we then provide, we assess those students to see if they're proficient in English. So there are just a subset of those multilingual learners that are then English learners. So that number is slightly smaller. We do provide services for our multilingual learners to all of those families. So we don't only focus on English learners, but the services look different for each group. And this, I think, can give us a good idea of where that growth is happening. So historically, in decades past, up until the last 5 to 10 years, we've noticed that most of that enrollment occurs in just some key buildings, which historically was AMI, Roberts, AWL, and our high school was Withrow originally. But that has grown. Typically, that's been by one building per year. But now, within the last 3 years or so, we find that it's not just one building per year that's growing. And so we have, again, exponential demands on the services that we need to provide in different places throughout the city. This is just an overview of the staffing that we use to provide some of those services. We have 89 teachers in 16 different schools. So on the prior slide, you saw where we have a greater than 20% enrollment of MLs, and that is now 16 schools. One of those schools is Woodward. Woodward is not greater than 20%. However, we are in the process of building a very careful program there so that we can respond to the call from the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce to be more inclusive of our English learners in career tech. We have 23 specialists in 52 buildings. Those are itinerant specialists. We have now an ESL instructional coach, a lead teacher who is non-release, meaning that she is a teacher all day long, but also serves as a mentor to general education teachers, as well as to new ESL teachers in the district, an ESL curriculum council chair, and we have recently built an English learner cadre to respond to the needs of our general education teachers who are yelling loudly, asking for help in the classroom when they have a changing population that they don't necessarily know how to respond to. So these are right now 8 practicing ESL teachers who provide PSYOP strategies. I know that's a buzzword we are probably all familiar with, PSYOP strategies. So those are practicing teachers that are prepared to present and support our general education teachers in PSYOP strategies. We have EL family coordinator positions in 14 different schools, 14 of those 16 schools that were listed in the previous slide. We have a few vacancies at the moment. Those are difficult positions to fill because we look for bilingual people from the community who already have connections with the family. But they have proven to be a very valuable resource in keeping our families engaged, keeping our students engaged in attending school regularly, as we've talked about tonight. And then we have 4 bilingual social workers that also serve really a task that no one else in the district can do as far as being able to connect our families with resources to understand different values that maybe they might not be familiar with. So this is also beginning to highlight a key point. I think the board has, and the superintendent has made a call for us to really reimagine how we provide our services to families and students, in part because of this drastic change in our enrollment. And so this, I think, highlights what we are doing to respond to that, and that is to increase our partnerships across different departments within the district, to expect more accountability across those departments. So the bilingual social workers are just one department that those social workers report to Director Manisha House, and we'll kind of highlight some other departments that are taking part in this important work aside from just now the Department of Student Services and our Office of Second Language Acquisition. And then at the bottom, we do have a range of ESL counselors that are able to respond to some very specific needs for our English learners. There's a lot of questions about how we schedule students in high schools, how we provide the right kind of classes for students to be able to graduate on time. So we have a lot of collaborative efforts among counselors across buildings to understand a lot of the nuances there. Okay, next slide. These are our key now, moving forward, these are our key goals. Originally, I think this work started more than 20 years ago, where the key goal was compliance. So obviously, we maintain that goal of compliance. We are also now, we have had a foundation over several years of working with curriculum and instruction. However, that effort has grown significantly. That's another area besides positive school culture with Ms. House. That's also another area, curriculum and instruction, where there's more shared responsibility, more accountability, and understanding of the work that needs to be done. So we provide a great deal of professional development, talent development, so that we have more teachers and personnel who represent the students that we serve. And I think this is really, the key exciting step forward is our partnership with family and community engagement to ensure that we are increasing the work we do with families.
Board members have any questions, comments? Glad to see this presentation. Mr. Craig?
So wanted to highlight a couple of things that you mentioned, and I think it's important for us to be paying attention to this. I think I've said this a couple times in different spaces, but I think there are multilingual learners in our English language learners. We are seeing this pattern because they're also populating in certain parts of our city that are causing some of these numbers within our schools to increase. And so, I mean, I think it's worth noting that the two schools from a high school perspective that have the largest percentage happen to be on one part of our city, right? And I think this is not something that's lost on any of us because we know that there's a large population of immigrants that are coming into those spaces within the west side of the city, and the schools that they will go to are on the west side of the city. So I think it is something for us to continue having a conversation about where our population trends are happening within the city. I think this is also something worth noting because we have a large number of our surrounding communities that have not been as inclusive and embracive of some of the immigrant populations that have come to our city. And as we've seen on even the national platform of folks who like to make messages that do not necessarily respect and value those who are immigrants to our community, when you have a space that is inviting, the message gets out really quickly. So I don't imagine us getting a lower percentage. I imagine it probably growing, as you said, exponentially when people find out that there are opportunities to have someone who works with your family fully to have their child get education. That's a good thing for us. That's the way we do growth in our district. But it also means there may be areas that we have to think about as to both the growth of the population and resources needed, but even within those schools, do we have support that will sustain that within the school? Because I think that is the question. That's the one concern I do have, is that could we potentially see a growth in population on the west side of students who are multilingual learners who have really specific needs that expand the growth in the west side, but may not see that reflected on every school or throughout the district more evenly. So that was the only thought I really wanted to share is again, the population patterns in our cities matter. And I would hope that our wonderful city leaders will help in that process of also thinking about how do we expand opportunities for folks who are those families throughout the city so that they are not congested in one specific area and that we don't have all the resources piled into one area.
Thank you. So we do have some technical difficulties, and I know we're short on time, so I won't, require us to look through the rest of those points. But there are two key points, and one of those, or I think actually both of those, would respond to your point. We do have some, and this slide and the one before it, this one here, and the text, unfortunately, that you can't see, lists a broad range of partners that we have built relationships with. I know that you've met with Brian Wright recently. He has proven to be an invaluable partner for us as we brought high school students in to work with partners that know how to address the needs that are specific to the immigrant community. We have, and this, again, it addresses, I think, some of what we've looked at tonight with absenteeism, engagement in school. Many of our students in the high schools, they are often unaccompanied minors. They are often, they do not see the same path forward that we expect of all students. So our partners have the resources to help them see what a possible path forward is. They have the encouragement and the mentorship that they might not always see at home. If they are here with family, our partners do a wonderful job even at advising families on the resources that are available in a city and a culture that they really know nothing about. So we have some really exciting things going on in the schools that our partners are having some direct contact with families and students and advising in post secondary planning. So that's another area with Career Tech and our community and our college, career, and community engagement department. Also, we collaborate with them in that same effort. The last thing I really wanted to make sure we had time to address is on the last slide is, if we have time, we can come back to this, but the last slide addresses an MLL resource center that I know has come up in several presentations that the superintendent has provided you with. This is, I think, an exciting idea, and that third category that we have as far as increasing family and community engagement in specific areas. So our families are concentrated in a certain area of our city. Our students are concentrated in certain schools, and they have difficulty coming here to the Ed Center to speak with you about their needs. They have difficulty sometimes getting to the places that we might want them to be. So we're working on providing a good space for an MLL resource center, and these should address a lot of these goals that we have within our strategic plan and things that are addressed in the state report card as far as attendance, graduation rates. But we are looking, all plans are tentative and ongoing, but we're looking at kind of continuing the progression of the Welcome Center that we have at Roberts, an IB school, and looking at how that can be continued into then the high school at Dater High School. So we obviously, we have a lot of supports at the elementary school. That need should not be ignored, but we do have a significant need with our high school students and their families to be engaged. So we are addressing that concern in that location. And I think your other concern is about how do we make sure that those same services are provided throughout the city. And we are in our work with this year with family and community engagement. We're working on parent academies, and those are occurring in our 3 corridors.
Thank you. Vice President?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cooper. I just have a couple of questions. And excuse me if I should already know the answer to this, but if you could go back to slide 10, please. On slide 10, I know that you're listing here just some of the services that are offered, and I'm very happy that you listed or stated career tech. That was going to be a question that I had, but I'm also concerned with in terms of transportation as families are trying to get their transportation together. I know that has been a huge concern. And can you tell me, what is the family coordinator's role, and what do the bilingual social workers, what do they do? I'm just
They have similar, but separate roles too. Well, they do work together in the summer outreach project, but throughout the year in the schools, our family coordinators, we refer to the EL coordinators as family coordinators. They are also what is kind of a new effort this year is they're connecting closely with the resource coordinators, so they help complement that work, but they're able to meet the specific needs of bilingual families or families that are monolingual, Spanish-speaking, who have more trouble, I guess, accessing the resources that a resource coordinator provides in there.
And are there plans to help with the transportation setup in regards to whether it's Metro, Yellow Bus, et cetera?
No, thank you for that suggestion. We will look into that. I will say that is another goal of the family coordinators is and it's something, if we had more time to talk about the Newcomer Academy idea, this is something that gets a lot of discussion. We have a lot of similar districts in our state and neighboring cities in Kentucky that have similar kind of newcomer academies that address the academic needs of ELs. But what we really have done traditionally in this district is we've provided those services that an academy would provide, both on the family side, but also on the academic side, specific to the building where those students are, because it promotes more inclusion. It doesn't require students to exit a building each day, to be kind of separate in a separate facility and then come back into a full inclusive environment. So it's really a better inclusive environment for our students. It actually promotes more shared responsibility and accountability across a building. So administrators and teachers who may not, historically have had that exposure to these families, understand their needs, they begin to take on that understanding and relationships with those families because we're doing that within the building. So as far as transportation goes, it is a suggestion we need to look into, but we also are working to come to them.
Thank you.
Dr. Moffitt?
So I'm going to probably send you some of these questions because I've asked them of Superintendent Murphy, and she knows where I'm going with this. We have had a specific increase in your data, particularly from the city, because there's an influx of that population that is going to need some support. So I have questions around, I think the enrollment data is great, but I want data per school. I want to know, when I look at the state report card, it doesn't look to me, and maybe I'm wrong, and again, I want to invite you back to another presentation, to do another presentation. The OELPA scores of the students, how is that transferring to the state test? I would like to see, what does the data look like from last year to this year on a trend per school? When you go back to slide 4, Rob, please, when you show that the enrollment of these schools, and it's significant, 74.5%, 62.8%, that's significant, but it didn't just get that way. So I'm interested in trend data. How are those students performing academically? What services and what partnerships are at those buildings? Because it also looks to me like you've got roughly of 5595, so let's say a little over 5,500 multilingual learners, but we're only looking at 4 bilingual social workers. That's an enormous amount of gap for, that doesn't even make sense. I don't even know if that complies with what they would be normally, let alone for our ESOL population. So 14 EL family coordinators for that population, 23 specialists in 52 buildings. That doesn't, that when you say on a cursory level, we have vacancies, you have lots of vacancies or a lot of needs. So I'm interested in the data on what is at that building, what is the academics of that building, what's that data, and where the gaps are, because there are gaps that just doesn't make sense that there wouldn't be. What positions do you need? What positions are currently there? What partnerships are going into that building? And then we need to look at, from the board level, where those buildings are located. Obviously, they're, it's on the west side predominantly, but in our conversations around boundaries, because that's one of the reasons why the ad hoc committee didn't do anything with boundaries on the west side, because it was just so large and it was going to take a huge Herculean effort, because that population, the population on that side is growing as we were doing our work. So just to give you the questions, how are we, CPS, monitoring effectiveness of the work? What's the data? So I don't have that data per school. And then what does the data look like last year? And I'm actually looking at trend data, so I'd love to see the year, 2 or 3 year data. What family and community partnerships have we developed to support those families? We've got a joint meeting with the city coming up in October. They have asked us very specifically, what do you need so for this population? So those are questions that you need to be able to answer, because perhaps we can get some support from organizations that want to partner with us. But again, if we don't know where the gaps are, then we have no ability to ask for support. What schools have large numbers of newcomers? And then what do those supports look like by school is what I'm interested in. I am interested in that state data testing from that population, and then the vacancy of those populations. What is that number per school? And then we can look at it per corridor and start to fill in those gaps. But I'm interested in the new initiatives. I think those are great and wonderful, but we need to get a baseline on where we are so that we can support that community, because I anticipate, per your first graph, it is going up significantly, and it's anticipated to be very, very enormous next year, but we need to know where we need to put those supports back. So I want to invite you to come back to us. I don't know if it's Monday's meeting, but for sure the joint meeting, and then for sure in October, so that we can start to begin conversations around the data. That's what I'm looking for, is the actual data. So thank you.
Great. We have that data. I'm not sure it's in presentable form, but we are excited to talk about that data. There is a lot of nuance by school and as a district at large. So as we disaggregate the data, it does look different by schools. There's great work with the senior leadership team in looking at those schools on a school-by-school basis, and again, collaborating across departments, particularly with curriculum and instruction, to make sure that by school they're provided with as much support as they need to make the growth that we expect.
And you mentioned, just one last thing, because it just triggered something when you started speaking. You mentioned that some of the positions are hard to fill. And have we done some out-the-box thinking? If we have a large population that is, maybe some parents can fill in on positions. I do know that, are the administrators of these buildings allowed to pick their own people versus it be a district initiative? Those are things that this particular community is around relationship building. We know this with regard to cultural competency. So are we already allowing the principals to pick people who they know that maybe we can get in there very quickly to be able to service that population, rather than to have it come from top down, that this is who you need to put in here? So I think we can probably, I would like to see how we're exploring filling vacancies for that population, when we know demographically this is a population in this community that's growing, and the city is putting resources here. So again, we need to see where the gaps are so that perhaps we can fill some of those vacancies. But I'm also just very interested in volunteer opportunities that currently exist. How are we capitalizing on things? It's great to have a multilingual academy. That's great, but that's visionary. We need to how are they being serviced right now? To get the scores up is what I'm looking for. Because the state report card data is not matching the utopia that I see. So that's what I'm looking for. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Member Mapp?
Yes, thank you. So I greatly appreciate you presenting this to us and elevating, these concerns and how our MLL as well as English language learners are doing. And I also would agree, just looking at the state report card and that data. So we're seeing trends of growth and achievement, as well as, achievement and growth overall for our ELL students as well as our Hispanic students. However, it's not correlating or matching with the graduation rate. So I am concerned to know what those challenges are, or have you all done a deep dive to see, okay, we're seeing progress happen, however, there's a breakdown in what that dissonance maybe is. And then the other question is about the OELPA assessment. So we did not obtain any points. Is it because we just haven't seen growth in that particular area, or there's some additional challenges that were at work where we didn't, see any progress overall?
Yeah, so it is true, we actually essentially stayed stagnant as a district in the OELPA growth. But if you look at that by building, there are some buildings that made significant growth, met their growth target. We have buildings where sometimes that is the only gap closing measure that allowed them to achieve a star in that category. And when we look at those schools, those that are making the growth have really been schools, for instance, like West High, or our high schools, where we've gone through about a 3-year process of building a department there. It's really been longer, but it's been really 3 intensive years that kind of settled in this past year. And in that building at West High, they made more than 10% growth, which allows us to meet our target, even though the district sets for last year set a 50% growth. We were able to, although we didn't reach 50%, in certain buildings, we've met more than 10% growth, because that's where the population originally started to change. That's where we originally started to focus our services and build different services for those buildings. Now, some of those that we're starting to see either regression or stagnation, those are typically, there's some elementary schools, not all elementary schools, there are some elementary schools that are now seeing a lag in that demographic. So oftentimes the students that are making up a large part of this increase are unaccompanied minors. So those are our high school students. That's why the high schools have experienced great growth. And that's why we've historically in the past few years put a lot of resources there. So now we're adjusting to what we're seeing, that same trend in some elementary schools, and we're being proactive this year in replicating some of what we do there in those buildings. And then we do have some elementary schools that are kind of beacons of programs and what you should do. So we're working with those buildings to share their practices and strategies.
Good. And if we can have that disaggregated data, because on the website, it just shows you that there was no points obtained or no growth there. So if we could see it, the breakdown by school, that I think that would be really helpful. And then the last question around partnerships, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know, but I do know that organizations like Santa Maria or Sukasa, I don't know if we have partnerships with it. I know it's kind of like under that Catholic umbrella, but, you know, thinking about Santa Maria is on the west side. I know that Sukasa is over on Redden Road. So if we have active partnerships or can explore a partnership to support our students and our families, I think that would be really helpful, knowing that they are like staples in the community.
Yeah, those are, they are historically very strong partners. Again, we've kind of centralized those partnerships in a select group that have addressed the needs of this population for a long time. And as we're moving forward, we're looking to expand that beyond just kind of that small core group of personnel. So, you know, that's why maybe many people don't know about some of those partnerships. So that's what we're trying to do, is raise awareness, highlight those partnerships. We do have some other faith-based partnerships that are newer than those that have been around the city for a long time. So, and it's not just faith-based partnerships, they're partnerships, you know, nonprofits too, across the board. So we do hope to highlight those so that everyone's aware what they provide.
Okay, thank you. And so when you come back and present next time, can you share more information on, again, how we're noticing the trends, but we're seeing the decline as it pertains to the graduation rate? If you can share information about that, I think that would, hopefully that would be welcomed and helpful.
Sure. Any other questions, comments? I just have one question. Proportionately, it has appeared for a good 12 years at least, maybe more. We're looking at the growth, particularly in Hispanic or Spanish or whatever speaking folks coming out of Central America and South America. And I'm interested from the standpoint of my own alma mater, as well as some friends at Withrow, where are we seeing the concentration of our new students from Africa and from North Africa and the Middle East? I think one of the interesting things that's developing is to the amount of Muslims that we have within our district. I think that's a new phenomenon within the district, where I see where we have welcome centers and whatever. Does this speak to the true variety? Because it seems to be concentrated in a couple of particular places. I think it should be where people live. Where do we see the concentration of folks from Africa?
Well, I think, first of all, for Withrow, I think that they tend to maintain a more diverse subset of the total population just because of the history of the building.
Sure.
And kind of word of mouth with families. Whereas the other buildings, it is more about enrollment, sometimes the magnet program. And it's really a lot about affordable housing. So honestly, regardless of backgrounds, oftentimes these families share neighborhoods regardless of their background. So there are Muslim families, African families in the west side as well. We see those in the elementaries. We see those increases in the elementary school, particularly at Westwood. Mount Airy is another area. And so we have done in the past, which we can do if I return to present some of the requested disaggregated data. We have done some heat maps for what languages are spoken in different zip codes around the city.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you. Any other questions before we move on to the fourth presentation? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lindy. My
I was
bad.
just going to say thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
I don't know. He said thank you. Treasurer Wagner, you have some a presentation and also some news for us.
Yes, just a quick update, but thank you. So go ahead. At the last time on September 9th, when we gave you an update on where we were with the budget, some things had changed. And so just to remind you that at the time our target was reduced to 625.9 because of the state revenue changes. And at the time, our budget was sitting at 630.9. So then we had about a $5 million problem. So in order to balance, our budget is made up of people, contracts for services, and supplies, basically. So in order to balance, we had to cut either people or contracts. Next slide. So the senior leadership team met on Monday, and we were able to come up, I'll walk you through these, but about $2 million worth of contract reductions. The first one would be a net reduction for the Connect Our Kids to the Wi-Fi for families. So much of it has already been spent, and some offsetting expenses happened, so we would get a net reduction of $200,000. ITM is able to reduce their fuel contract for the generator because they had a late fill last year, and so they're not going to need as much. They have some in inventory, they don't need as much for next year. But then the following year, they'll return back to their normal rate. There's a postponement for the Rawson project, a Part B of it. Part 1 is underway, but and even if the money was there today, they wouldn't get to spend the money until after the end of the fiscal year, so they don't really need the budget in this year, they need it in next year, just because of the timeliness of all the work. There was a reduction to Grad Cincinnati by $10,000 because they got a late start. A reduction to the children's athletic trainer contract. We went through 3 months with some positions had not been filled, so we won't need to pay for those services for July, August, and September. We were able to reduce the Romberg contract, who's the guy who looks at job studies, just based on history and the track record. We're not going to spend as much as we originally thought. And the Suzuki contract is $100,000 a year. That we found a Fund 19 grant that had, for Suzuki, that had $100,000 sitting in it. So we're just going to move that money out of the general fund, use the Fund 19, and then it'll come back to the general fund next year. We also, just like the athletic trainers, we also had some resource coordinator roles that had not been filled. And so we're going to capture those savings with reduced contracts of $144,000. Excuse me. So there were 6 schools that had not filled for July, August, and September, and then estimating 1 school will have about a 6-month savings. And based on enrollment and the preliminary teacher allocation work, we believe we can reduce our staffing contingency because we're not going to need to add staff at this point. There's still some left money. It's a $1 million contingency, but we're not going to. We didn't use it all of it last year, and so we feel comfortable reducing that by $500,000. And then because at the end we were trying to fulfill all the ESSER spends, we were able to carve out about $60,000 out of the Treasurer's Department budget to help with that. So we were able to cut $2,060,000. That leaves us with about a $3 million gap. Next slide. As of today, right? So just kind of go over the history of this whole issue. This is probably the hardest budget I've had in 30 years. But the board publicly voted and pledged for fiscal sustainability, which means because our cash balance was moving down, a normal trend, that we committed to having our expenditure budget not exceed our annual forecast to preserve our cash balance. Through that period, we absorbed or reduced $112 million in ESSER cost spends. We honored the negotiation of the 2% COLA for all our employees. We absorbed just increased cost due to inflation. Everything costs more money. We adjusted the forecasted revenues twice based on property value increases and increased revenue. We were able to implement the first phase of the growth and sustainability plan. And we were able to absorb about half of the state revenue reduction. Remember, it hit us from one month to the next. It was a $6 million reduction. And we were able to do all that without cutting major personnel and programming. So that leaves us, we're within 0.5% of our target. So we're at 628.9 right now, and we were trying to get to 625.9. So next slide. So the options before the board is we can use part of our cash balance. We did underspend this year's budget general fund budget by over $3 million, just over $3 million. So we have a tendency to underspend. We do have cash that's not committed. So we ended the year in June with $53 million of unencumbered cash. So we had more, but we had $20 million of contracts and encumbrances sitting out there waiting to pay out. So $53 million of unencumbered cash. We were using 5.6 of the preschool expansion from the prior year savings. You remember that? 7.2 for the COLA was the increased TIF money, the revenue that we received this year. So we said we'd use that to pay for COLA. So that gets us down to $40 million of uncommitted cash. Our estimated revenues for next year for the general fund is 625.9. And based on the current value of today's budget, would be 628.9, would leave us with an ending cash balance of 37, almost $38 million. The alternative is to do a reduction in force or hit some major contracts that would impact the classroom and curriculum. So, next slide. So this is a trend of our cash balance at the end of each year. As you can see, it's a downward slide, but this is normal. If you went back and looked at every 8-year cycle, this is what it looks like. So the beginning of a levy cycle, you tend to be a little cash rich because your annual revenue is more than your typical expense, but as inflation grows, your expense line goes up, your revenue line is flat and or down because of our state funding formula. So this is kind of a normal trend. It's getting a little uncomfortably low, but and I just wanted to point out that we have not gone for new money levy in 8 years. They had the 5-year levy has lasted us 8 years so far. And then prior to that, our last new money levy was in 2008. So it seems to be, we seem to be on like an 8-year cycle to catch up with inflation and strategic initiatives. So next slide. So I'll answer questions. On Monday night, we will bring you, well, depending on the conversation that you have, an appropriations resolution to pass to meet the September 30 deadline. We will continue, once we get the budget loaded, we haven't uploaded the budget yet because I don't want to keep revising it, and the auditors will look to make sure that our budget equals the appropriations resolution. So once you approve the resolution, we'll load the budget, we'll monitor for underspending areas and start capturing some money back so that we can preserve and make sure that we stay within our budget allowance.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Any comments for our treasurer or superintendent? Mr. Craig, Finance Chair.
So, again, I think to your point that this is the hardest budget you've worked on. I feel like this is the longest time it's taken us to reach a budget since I've been on the board. And that I think this is just difficult, and then next year this will be even more difficult. And I want to thank you and the superintendent on also committing to starting this conversation now and in budget and finance, because I do think we cannot be in the same position next year. And it means that we'll have to do some things different. And I think that's another thing that we are looking at and thinking about, because we provide, as we just saw today, so many services that people don't want to give to us for free, so we got to pay them. But I think what we also have to acknowledge within this is that cash balance is one thing that you've stressed in budget and finance that we have to be paying more attention to, because it does put us in a difficult position at times as we get to the end of those cycles that we won't have. We'll have to make really hard decisions that will hurt for real. And so I appreciate all the hard work that everyone's done on this and all the tough gives that people have had to do along the way.
So to kind of put some perspective in relation to the presentation we just saw, and the English language learners are near and dear to my heart. Spanish was my first language, and I have a Haitian daughter. So, but we spend, the general fund budget right now is about $12 million to support English language learners. We get about $1 million from the state and about $1 million in federal grants. And so they're not helping us sustain. So in order to fund those things, you have to take the money away from something else.
Thank you. Other comments? Dr. Moffett?
So I know this is painful. I feel like I know you enough to say that I'm sure you and your team have spent some countless hours, more than a little frustrated with having to get through this. So thank you for all your hard work to you and the team. I don't like that we cut grad Cincinnati. I don't want to go through the list, but I'm not happy with some of those choices. But I also am really, what's sticking to me when you said, well, if it's not this, it's going to be some cuts to curriculum to students. I am not convinced that some of our contracts cannot be trimmed down some more, specifically Hamilton County. And I've looked at, we've had this conversation a little differently multiple times, but I think at one point we said like $11 million was $9 million. There was a multi-million-dollar contract at Hamilton County, and not all of that touches students. Yet we pinched some to touch students here. And so, you know, athletic trainers have come up for us. To me, that's a safety issue. Grad Cincinnati, if you say that they started late, then perhaps that's money that we can recoup. Resource coordination, if indeed we started late because those are vacancies, then perhaps. But contracts that are not directly touching students should be our focus, particularly because we spent many years listening about how we needed to cut contracts that were didn't go through an RFP process, or that were multi-millions of dollars and that needed to be looked at. So I would like to get a little bit more information around that. I thought we kind of had this fixed in May, so I'm very frustrated because I thought we were almost there in May, and we're not. So
Well, we were balanced in July, and the state dropped us by $6 million. So, but to answer your Hamilton County question, that's all Title I. It's not helping our problem. You can't just cut Hamilton County out of Title I and take money out of the general fund and throw it over in Title I.
No,
That's
I
just a
understand
plan.
that. I understand
So
that.
we are going through all of our contracts, but for this purpose, we focused on general fund. We did not cut Grad Cincinnati. They just they didn't start, so we're not going to pay out that 10,000. Sorry, I said 10 million. So we're not slashing contracts, but we are looking for opportunities. We were just focusing on the general fund because that's our big problem right now.
Okay.
And we're trying to save people's jobs.
I completely understand, and I heard you when you said that. So all of the money from Hamilton County is title money, all of that?
I will go back. We did a presentation at Finance Committee. I'll pull it up, but I'm almost positive it's all title funds.
Okay, well,
And a lot of it is in the school improvement grant, so that's their own grant and not central office stuff.
well, definitely, if we definitely confirm that, then, you know, for sure. And I heard you when you said that those contracts didn't start because of vacancies. I heard that. We would like for us to really be very diligent in ensuring that before we touch things that touch kids, we've done that. And I'm not saying that you haven't. I just am sharing that is an ouch for me. So, but thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Other questions, comments from board members? I appreciate, Mr. Lindy.
Thanks, Ms. Bolden, and thanks, Treasurer Wagner. I think the presentation was just very clear, and I really appreciate that. I wanted to try to make sure I followed the choice points we have. So option one is we adopt an appropriations resolution that dips further into our cash balance than we said we would when we started the budget process, option one. Option two, we make deeper cuts.
That's correct.
Got it. And if we do, I don't know which of those two I think is the right thing yet. I'm just trying to gather the information, but I really appreciate the clarity with which everything was laid out. The standards that we have to meet for the 5-year forecast, would we still meet those even if we did option one?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Other questions, comments, as follow-up? Just a point of clarification. When we made the commitment in public discussion and public vote, literally last year, as a board. We said we wanted to have a budget that recognized the annual revenue, and that we were not going to spend more in that particular year than the revenue that was generated.
That's correct.
Okay? And this whole year and several months that we've been going through, how close did we come with all of the changes and all of the concerns and all of the decisions? How close did we come to meeting not the initial number, but the initial commitment regarding revenue and expenditure?
So you're within 0.5%.
Okay, I'm happy. Thank you very much. I think that's pretty reasonable.
And, without sounding patronizing, I'm really proud of the board for doing this commitment, because
Me
it's,
too.
previous boards have not necessarily wanted to live within the annual forecasted revenue, because we wanted to invest in things, and we had cash that we could do that. We just don't have as much cash anymore that we did, and so we need to be a little bit wiser about what we spend our money on. And we have a lot of money, it's just what we choose to spend our money on. The difficulty with this is that we're already several weeks, months into the year. So much money has already been committed out just to fund operations and salaries. And so it's hard to go back and make some of those more difficult cuts. And, different administrations had different priorities. It's been a tough one.
I agree, and we have been able to meet the initial concerns and interests of our employees with the COLA that we've gone through. I think that's important, but I appreciate the administration's efforts in all of this, and my hope is that we will, by law, must pass the appropriations on Monday night. Correct?
That's correct, Monday night. And we will continue to monitor and report out progress that's being made in managing the budget, and so that we'll monitor it very closely and continue to make decisions on what can be postponed or delayed or shifted based on new information. But I just also wanted to remind, I'm going to put it on there, that the central office took a really big hit this year. Over 30 positions were reduced, to the point of not being able to keep up with the work. And I'm concerned about staying on top of compliance things. And if we do bring on the crossing guards, that's adding hundreds of people to the payroll and hundreds of people to the HR department to manage. And so with reduced resources, it's going to make it that much harder to be good and excellent at what we do when serving in schools. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Appreciate the work. If there's no other comments or questions, Superintendent, you're good with the presentation by the treasurer. Congratulations to you and the treasurer and the board, and God knows everybody else that's had to do this. And I know it's been a long bleed to do this. Madam Treasurer.
Just one more thing, and I promise to keep reminding everybody, we're at 27% compliance on our fraud reporting or training, and we're going to continue to hound people because your deadline is November 29th. So if you haven't done it yet, it's really easy. Please do it.
We're going to consider them frauds if they don't participate. At any rate, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. I think it's by